It is June 1st, 2024 today, and I'll be doing a plant profile for you today on a tree that I have growing in my yard called the delonix regia, Royal Poinciana, also known as the flamboyant tree and flame tree. This tree has been growing in ground in my backyard near Phoenix, Arizona for about 7 years now. It was planted in spring 2017 as a 3-gallon plant. So very small little stick, and has turned into this gorgeous specimen tree. This tree originates from Madagascar, but it's actually grown throughout the world. You'll find them in Australia, certainly in the US, in Hawaii and Florida, in tropical regions. And we can grow them here in Arizona 9B. For a flowering tree, there are other options that are potentially easier. Hong Kong orchid, jacaranda, Tipuano tipu come to mind. Those all grow very well in our climate. The reason I selected this tree is because it is such a gorgeous, unique tree. As you can see, it's in bloom right now. This is its second year blooming at year 7, and just incredible colors on the red-orange blooms. Unlike a lot of plants that I'm growing, this is not an edible. It does put out seed pods, but those are not edible. So it's really meant for the shade as the main benefit for this tree and just a focal point in my yard. A lot of the inspiration behind why I've selected certain plants is because I want to feel like I'm in a tropical environment, and this tree absolutely does that. Stands up to the sun. And the only real precaution is winter, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute, as well as the root system, the growth habit, and really your location where you put this plant, microclimate aspects. So with these flowers, they're quite prolific. There'll be a spray of buds on them and just clusters of blooms of an intense red and orange. You'll see that at least for this year, the majority of the blooms are on the left. And the only thing I can see that's different that's on this side of the tree is that I have a mist system going in the run there, and I think it's maybe higher humidity in that section. These can bloom a little earlier. You might get blooms, as early as 2 to 3 years in the ground. The average is more that 5 to 6 year range. I have seen examples of this tree in Yuma where the entire canopy is encrusted in bloom on very mature trees that have been in ground 20-25 years. So that's another thing to think about, is the bloom set is just going to get better as the tree matures, and these are very long-lived trees. So you definitely want to put these in a good location, a place where they can thrive for a very long time. So 7 years in the ground, you can see that the tree is quite massive. It is around, I would say, 18 to 20 feet tall. And we see a spread of about 20 feet on this tree. That is their typical growth habit. They are more of an umbrella type canopy spreading. I do trim this tree, top it so that it doesn't get beyond 20 feet, because they can grow to 40 feet and have that equal type spread. So when you're thinking about putting this tree in the ground, you definitely want to put it in a place where there is space. It's a great focal type plant for your yard and provides really nice filtered light. As we look through the canopy, you can see it's not dense foliage that blocks light. It provides that perfect kind of filtered light. So light can still penetrate through the tree, but it does provide great shade. On climate, these plants really prefer a frost-free environment, but you can see certainly here in 9B, where my yard does get down to 25 at times in the winter for an extreme low, and an extreme high of 120, these do just fine and can certainly grow here. But when you're thinking about placement, choose wisely, because I was growing another one in the yard for actually 8 years. It was even larger than this one, and ended up pulling it out because it was getting damaged quite a lot from the winter, whereas this one does not. So it's all about microclimate, picking the right place to plant the tree in your yard, picking a location that's going to be warmer in the winter time than anywhere else in your yard. That little bit of incremental heat is really important to get these trees through because they are very frost sensitive. If frost does settle on the limbs, it can cause dieback. Our winters will definitely defoliate the tree. This is an evergreen in, tropical climate, but here the leaves are going to die back for a couple months. The tree will be bare. But in general, this is an evergreen. So talking a bit more about the location of this tree. This is south facing, so it gets sunlight pretty much year round. And you can see that on the ground here, I've got a lot of hardscape nearby. I've got a path, decomposed granite, have some concrete, pavers, and also edging material. I also have a lot of trees around it that are evergreen. Got guava and citrus and bamboo, and all of that helps create a buffer around the plant. You can also see a structure here on this side. That also helps. Helps with wind and also keeps it a little bit warmer. So I mention all this because another plant I had was in a more open area. It was a cooler area of the yard. There was no hardscape around it, and it suffered a lot more damage. Whereas this tree just does not get damaged. Certainly the cold tolerance of this tree is going to increase as it matures. Really important the first few years of its life to protect that trunk. These are so fast growing that it's not practical to maybe, frost protect the entire tree, but you can definitely preserve that trunk. Wrap that with burlap. Try to keep the frost off of it. You could also wrap C9 Christmas lights around the base or use a heat source just to keep that trunk warm. Because even if the top canopy dies back, if that trunk stays alive, there's a point of regrowth for the tree in the springtime, and it can rebound very, very quickly. Once we reach triple digits, it's going to start rapidly growing. These trees can easily put on 6 feet of growth in a year. They're relatively fast-growing trees. So when it comes to our climate, the main thing is just protecting these trees in the winter time. You do not need to protect them in the summertime. There's no need to, shade protect these trees. They want full-on sun to grow. So let's talk a little bit about the root system here. This tree tends to have more shallow roots. You'll notice buttressed roots here coming up out of the ground. That's very characteristic of this tree. If we walk into this coop here, I'll just show you these roots you can see coming up out of the ground here. Those are from the Royal Poinciana. So the roots do travel quite a bit away from the plant, and they are shallow. So on location, definitely 20-25 feet away from any kind of structures, like your house, pathways, anything like that. I'm not worried about this because it's decomposed granite. It's not going to lift anything. But if you have concrete, it could do that, since these roots do tend to travel fairly close to the surface. And that's just the way this tree grows. It's not going to be influenced by how you water. Whether you look at this tree in Florida or in Arizona, the root system is the same. As far as soil pH, you don't have to worry about that in our area where we have high alkalinity. This tree actually does just fine in our soil pH and can tolerate high pH. So no need to put down elemental sulfur for this tree. And very quickly on planting, just like any other plant that I put into my yard, I don't go straight clay soil. I would mix in some pumice and some sand for better drainage. You could alternatively mix in some cactus soil. I used to do a half-to-half ratio, meaning take half the native clay soil out of your planting hole and replace it with some cactus soil, just to give the water the ability to drain through and not just sit in the hole. You could also potentially take a handful of gypsum and put that on the bottom of the hole. It does help change the soil composition over time. It's not overnight, but it can help with drainage and make your soil a bit more permeable. And I did initially put some fish fertilizer down every month or so its first year, but have since not done that because the tree seems to have grown really well for me, guessing that it's just getting what it needs from out of the clay soil on its own, as we do have a lot of rich nutrients in that clay. And given this is not pH sensitive in our area, can probably access that profile. As far as irrigation, you can see it is a large tree. It's definitely got some big roots in the ground and probably sucking up water all over the yard. While I do have some emitters that are right in this vicinity, near the root crown, that go on daily during summer, it's a very light application of water. This tree is likely just soaking up everything that it needs around. I wouldn't be surprised if the roots are extending, 20, 30 feet out from where it's planted. But I'd advocate same thing as I do with most plants, year one, year two, light frequent application daily in summer to ensure that the feeder roots are getting the water they need to support the plant, but then also doing a deep soaking once a week to ensure that those anchoring roots can penetrate through that thick layer of clay down deep so that the roots can get established and the tree can get huge. Beyond year two, I never really advocate for deep watering. I find it wasteful. That's totally up to you. I've always said, do what works for you and your yard. For me, it didn't make sense to do a deep water application past that year two mark, given that the tree is established and my focus is really just trying to keep those feeder roots happy in the first foot to two of soil. So that about wraps it up with the Royal Poinciana. It is not fuss-free, like I mentioned, just because there is some work to do up front in winter to get it through. But if you set it up correctly in the right microclimate, past year three, it should be pretty self-sufficient and not require any extra protection. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.